Hello everyone and welcome back. So in this tutorial we're going to be continuing with what we did in the previous tutorial, working towards a project and learning the fundamentals and basics of the Python programming language. If you have not seen the first video in this series, please go do check that one out beforehand, as we're going to be building on kind of what we've worked on already. So you can see where we've left off with the code we had before. I got rid of some of the comments I had below and we've just left this now. And what this program does at this point is just welcomes us to the game, asks us for our name and age, and then prints out the name and age of the user, so whoever typed that in. Now what I want to do here, and there's a few things we're going to have to learn to be able to do this, is check if the user is old enough to play our game. So I want to check if they are, older than 18, or if maybe this game is PG-13 or something, right? That's what I want to make sure that they're the correct age before we actually prompt them, do you want to play? So before we let them start playing, we want to check that they're older than a certain age. So how do we actually do that? Well, that leads me to an important thing called conditions. So first we need to talk a little bit about arithmetic. So arithmetic is just math. There's four main operators in, or not four, sorry, there's actually more than four. There are some main operators inside of Python that allow us to do arithmetic. Arithmetic is just math, right? So we have the asterisk, the star, the plus, the minus, and the modulus. Now there's also a /2, which we'll talk about very briefly. And these are important. These are the operators for math operations. So the asterisk is multiplication. The slash, the forward slash is division, the plus is addition, obviously. The minus is subtraction. The percent sign is actually modulus, which gets us the remainder of a division, I'll show you. And the / stands for integer division. So these are the main operators that we can use. And I just want to show you how we can do some basic math, just so you have that skill if you need to use it. We may not use it in this kind of project, but it is something important, so I figured I'd show it. So let's say we have the variable x equals 9 and y equals 8. What do I do if I want to add x and y? Well, I could do x plus y, right? That technically would add them, but I want to store that addition somewhere else. So just something important to understand is that when you do something like x plus y, this does not assign x to 17. It might make sense, right? If you say, oh, x plus y, you might be saying like, oh, add y to x. I could understand why that may seem logical to some people, but this doesn't really work in programming. When I do this, all that happens is this gives me a value 17, but it doesn't get stored anywhere. So what I need to do if I wanted to say add the value y to the variable x is do something like x equals x plus y. Now I'm going to say the variable x is equal to whatever the previous value of x was plus y. That will actually do that addition for me. Now same thing if I do this. So plus equals is a shortcut for what I just showed you. The people that made Python know that a common operation is to add one variable to another. So rather than having to rewrite, x equals x plus y, you can just do x plus equals y, which stands for x is equal to the addition of x plus y, right? That's pretty much what that's doing. So that will assign the value of 17 to x if you did something like that. Now, when you're doing arithmetic, the order of operations apply. So let's say I have a variable z, and I said z is equal to 9 times, or not 9 times 8, x asterisk y plus y. Well, the order of operations that we know will follow, which means this multiplication will happen before this addition. Now, let's say we didn't want that and we wanted to, change the order of operations. Well, we could use parentheses like we would in any other math or any other programming language or math or whatever, and then this will follow. So we will do the parentheses first. Now, these are the common operations, right? So this is multiplication, that's division. Now I'll just show you the kind of 2 or 3 ones that you might not know. So the exponential operator, which I actually haven't shown it, is the 2 asterisks. So when you do 2 asterisks, that stands for raised to the power. So x raised to the power of y plus y, so whatever that would be, so 16, I guess. And then the other 2 operators I wanted to show you were the mod operator and the integer division operator. So the mod operator, what this does is get the remainder after a division. So if I say x mod y, this is actually equal to 1. Now the reason this is equal to 1 is because the way you do this is you say, okay, how many times does 8 go into 9? How many times? It goes in 1 time, fully, right? It goes in 1 full time. What is the remainder after you take that 8 out of the 9? Well, it's 1, right? So if you do 9 divided by 8, you get 1 point something, but really it's 1, remainder 1. That's the way you can think of it. So like if I had, say, 5 and 2, then the mod again would be 1, because you say, how many times does 2 go into 5? Well, it goes in 2 times. Okay, so what is that? That's 4. Let's take 4 out of 5. Okay, what's the remainder now? Well, there's 1 left, so that's remainder 1. It's pretty straightforward. That's how that works. Whenever you do something mod 1, obviously the remainder is going to be 0, because 5 can be divided by 1 perfectly fine. And if I did something like 0 mod 1, then that would be equal to 0, because 0 does not go into 1 at all. So what's the remainder? 0. I hope that makes sense. That's the mod operator for you. It's not super important, so I won't spend too much time on it. And then we have the integer division. So integer division is 2 slashes, and this is kind of the opposite of mod. It doesn't give you the remainder after division. It gives you the whole number division, or the whole number quotient, I think is what it's called. So if I do 5 divided by 2, how many times does 2 evenly go into 5? Well, it goes in twice. So the integer division of x by y is going to be 2. Right? And then if I change this to 7, same thing. So how many times does 2 go into 7? Well, it goes in 3 times, so the integer division would be 3. That is the basics of those mathematical operators. Just in case you need to use them, I felt they're important to show. Now, with those operators, there's also a bunch of other operators too. We have a less than, we have a greater than, we have a less than or equal to, a greater than or equal to, an is equal to, and a not equal to. Now, these are what are known as our comparison operators, and this is how we actually check equality between different things. You know, you might imagine that it's actually pretty important for us to, for example, check if someone is older than a certain age. So if we wanted to check if the person's age was older than 14, we would have to use one of these operators to do that. Now, this is where we start talking about Booleans. I'm trying not to go too fast here, but again, I really do want to get to the project, but some of these things are pretty fundamental to go through. So actually, can I type in here? Let me just see if this works. Perfect. So I'll actually do some stuff in the console for us. And don't worry, I'll zoom in quite a bit so you guys can see this. All right, so zoom, zoom, zoom. Okay, and now I'm just going to do a few examples of what we call conditions or Boolean expressions. So remember I showed you that type before that was bool, right? That doesn't matter that you see that, but it was a bool. And those were the values true or false, right? So when we use these conditional operators, so that greater than, that less than, the less than or equal to, the greater than or equal to, the is equal to, the not equal to, when we use those, whatever we put on the left-hand side and the right-hand side will be compared using that operator, and we'll either get a true or false value. So if I said something, and this is like a really common example, 3 is less than 4. Well, what do you think, right? If I tell you this is going to be either true or false, so it's going to be one of those Boolean types, what do you think this would be? Well, of course that's true because 3 is indeed less than 4, right? And then if I switch this around, I say 3 greater than 4, well, we get false because 3 is not greater than 4. So this is the basics on how these conditional operators work. And I can do something like, 45 less than or equal to 45. Now, is this true or false? Well, that's true because the way that this works is it checks if the value on the left-hand side is less than or equal to this value, right? And that's kind of the basics on how some of these things work. Now, let me see. Can I clear? There we go. Awesome. Let's hit enter here and see if we can start typing. Now, the important ones that we want to go through, though, are comparing for equality. That's something we want to do a lot of times. So comparing numbers using the less than and greater than signs, that's pretty easy. I think that makes sense to most of you. It's either true or false. So you can read it and pretty well figure it out. But sometimes when we have checking for equality, it can be a little bit different. So if I have something like 5 equals 5, what this says is 5 equal to 5? So when I did before, right, when we made a variable, we could do something like x equals 5. And that is an assignment. That means we're assigning 5 to the value x. But if I go x equals 5, what I'm asking is x equal to 5? The 2 equal sign is like a question mark almost, like, is this true? Give me the result. Whereas the 1 equal sign is an assignment. You're telling x that, yes, it is equal to 5. So if I say x equals 5, we get the value true, right? And in fact, what I can do is make a variable called y. Let's say y equals 5. And I could say x equals y, and we'll get true. All that happens when I use the variables here is it will just check what their value is. So we've assigned their values here, and it will compare their values and tell me if that's true or false. So that is the very basics of how we can use that equality. So equals, and then there's one more, which is the not equals to. And what this does is tell us if two values are not the same. So whatever the result of the 2 equal sign would be, it's just reverse. So in this case, x is equal to y. So since they're not equal to each other, or since they are equal to each other, the not equal to will give us false, right? So if we look at false, it says no, these actually are equal to each other. So we're getting false for the not equal to operator. I hope that makes sense. Now, lastly, we can compare strings, right? So I can do something like hello equals hello, and boom, that works fine. That's totally true. But what happens if I try to do this? Hello equals 5. No, we cannot assign, oh, sorry, not hello equals 5. Hello equals 5. What am I saying? We get the value false, right? So when we compare different types, like an int and a string together, obviously those aren't going to be the same. And what if I actually go ahead and do something like this? 5 equals 5. Well, that's false too. So even though these values are technically the same, since this is a string and this is an int, we're going to get false. So that's very important that when we're checking things, they are the same type. Because if they're not, then we're going to get errors like this where they might actually be the same value, but it's not showing up as the same value. So I'm hoping this is making sense. Of course, we're going to go through more examples. But last thing I'll show you is that when I do like hello equals hello, do we think this is going to be equal or not? If you have a look at it, yes, no, what do you think? Let's run this. We get false. So whenever there's any capital letters, that really matters. So just make sure you understand that. The types really matter, and the capitalization matters as well. And I'm going to show you ways that we can deal with that, because you could imagine, like, if we're checking to see if the user types something in, we want them, if they type it in with a capital letter or not with a capital letter, we still want that to work, right? We still want to check and see that that value is what we want it to be equal to. So anyways, that was kind of the theory that we needed to go through. Now let's get it into the project and start working on it. Apologize if that was longer than anticipated. All right. So what did I want to do? I wanted to check if the user's age was over a certain value. So what I need to do is I need to write an expression that pretty much checks if age is greater than, some value, right? So let's first of all check this. Let's print, and we're actually going to go and we're going to say is underscore older. So I'm going to make a variable called is older. And I'm going to set that equal to age, and we'll say age greater or equal to 18. So what this is going to do is it's going to assign whatever the value of this expression is. So this will either be true or false to the variable is older. And then I'll print is underscore older, just like that. So this will just tell us true or false. And let's actually have a look at what we get here, because it might surprise you a bit. So let's run this and let's have a look at what we get. So let's go name Tim, age 19, and we get a bunch of red text. This is our first red text that we've seen. So this is an error message. I did this purposely, and I want us to read what actually happened here and see what line it happened at so that we understand what happens when we get an error message. So if you see this red text, don't worry. It just means you've done something wrong. Could be, well, it definitely is your fault because you typed it, but you can definitely figure out what's wrong just by reading through this error message quite easily. So you can see it says traceback, most recent call last. Don't worry about this gibberish. If it doesn't make sense, that's fine. What you're really looking for here is the line number, the actual line where this thing went wrong, and then what the error was. So in this case, it says file main.py, so that's the file we're working in. Line 7, okay, so line 7. This is the expression, so is older equals age greater than or equal to 18. And then type error, greater than or equal to, is not supported between instance of string and int. So what that actually means is that this age variable here is a string, and this here on the right-hand side is an int. So I cannot compare if the string, because imagine if I had a string like, hello, I can't say hello greater than or equal to 18. That doesn't make any sense. I can't do that. And since age is a string, we can't do that. But why is age a string? Didn't I type in 19? That's weird. Well, by default, whenever you type something in using input, it automatically comes in as a string. So even though I typed in 19 like this and I didn't put the 2 quotation marks around it, it automatically looks like this inside of my program. That's just the way it works, because this input doesn't know what we're going to type, right? So it has to just assume it's going to be a string, because a string can hold anything inside of it so long as it's wrapped in the quotation marks. So that's why we have to do that. So anyways, that's what we do. And yeah, so we now need to actually find a way that we can convert this age to an integer. So we need to take that string value and we need to convert it to an int so that we can actually compare these two things. So the way that I do that is I write int and then I wrap the variable age with this int. So I say int, open bracket, close bracket, around age. Now that says whatever this age is, so whatever number this age is, because in this case it's a string that's 19, let's just strip out the number from that. So get rid of the quotation marks and make this an int value. So now if I say is older equals the int value of whatever the age is, so take those quotation marks away, just make it an integer, and check if that's greater than or equal to 18. So this will work now. So let's actually have a look at this. So what is your name? Tim. What's your age? 19. Hello, Tim. You are 19 years old. And then it says true. So that totally worked, and that was fine. We were able to convert the string that we typed in into a number. So just keep that in mind. If you're asking a user to type in a number, then you want to make sure you convert whatever they typed in to an integer, so that when you want to compare it or you want to use it, it's actually an integer value. And there's another way to do this. I can type int around the input statement up here. And the reason this works is because this is pretty much doing the exact same thing we're doing down here, except now we're going to actually assign an integer value to the age variable rather than just convert the age variable later on to an int. So it takes the input, whatever the user types in, and then immediately just converts it right into an integer. And now I can remove this, and this will still work because this is being converted to an integer immediately. So let's run this. Let's say, what is your name? Tim. What is your age? 19. And now we get, hello, Tim, you're 19 years old. True. All right, so we've covered a lot of stuff. There's one more thing to go through, and this will be kind of the most exciting thing we do so far. So I'm excited to do it, and this is called the if statement. So right now we just printed true, but ideally, I want to give the user some different messages based on if they're old enough or not, right? I don't want to just print out true. So how do I do that? Well, this is where we use the if statement. So you've seen that we make these little conditions, right, by using these conditional operators, and these are either true or false. Now, the reason we use these is because we can use them inside of an if statement. So actually what I can do is, I don't need brackets, but I'm going to remove this variable is older, and I'm going to take this age greater than 18, and I'm just going to kind of code something out, and then I'll talk about how this works. Oops, if we could get this typing right, you are old enough. Okay. So what this is saying is this is an if statement. What the if statement does, it says if the condition here is true, do this. That's as simple as it is. You literally read it like plain English. You write the keyword if, so if, you write some condition here, whatever you want to check, but this needs to compare or it needs to be true or false. So this needs to evaluate to true or false. And then you put a colon. It's important you add the colon. Then down here, you do a tab, right? So you tab in, so one indent level, and whatever's inside of this indented block underneath the if statement will happen if this condition is true. If it's not true, it will simply skip whatever's indented and just keep moving on in the program. So I'll just show you because I'm going to print this twice just so that this makes sense. So I'll print this 2 times. So now if the age is greater than or equal to 18, we'll print you're old enough twice. So let's run this. And let's go ahead. What is your name? Tim. What is your age? 19. Hello, Tim. You are 19 years old. You are old enough. You are old enough. So that is exactly how that works. Now, there's one more component to show to this, and I think that was easy enough. Hopefully that makes sense. It's just if you write some condition here, and then if that condition is true, you go ahead and you do whatever's in this block. Now, what about if they're not older than 18, right? So if I run this again and I say, what is your name? Tim. 19. Hello, Tim. You are well, I should have selected an age that was younger. So let's do Tim 17. Hello, Tim. You are 17 years old. What if I want to tell them that they're not old enough to play? Well, I could do another if statement, right? I could do if age is less than 18, and then I could print that out. But there's actually an easier way to do this, and this is using an else. So this else statement kind of combines with the if. And whenever you write an if, you have the option, you don't have to, but it's up to you if you want, to put an else statement afterwards that tells you what to do if this condition is not true. So essentially this is saying, if this is true, do this, otherwise do this. And now we're going to put another indented statement, and we're going to say, you are not old enough to play, ... So let's try this now and just see how this works. So let's go Tim. Let's go 17, and now it says, hello, Tim, you're 17 years old. You are not old enough to play, whereas before it told us we were old enough to play. So that is the basics of the if statement. So we have the if and the else. Now I'll show you one more thing with the if statement, and then we'll kind of start the very beginning of our game and then continue the rest of it in the next one. But we've almost learned pretty much everything we need to know. So now we're going to go else, if. So else if is another statement that we can use. And the way that this works is essentially we're checking for one more thing. So let's say we had 3 options, right? Maybe if they were younger than 14, they just couldn't play. If they were older than 14, but they had a parent with them, they're allowed to play. And if they're older than 19, they could play alone. Maybe those are the 3 options we have. So what I could actually do is I could change this around a bit, and I can say if age is greater than or equal to 18, you're old enough to play. Then I could say else if. So if this isn't true, but this is true, so what I put here, age is greater than or equal to 14, then what I can do is print, you can play with supervision or something. Supervision. Okay, so now what I'm saying is, what is this? Sorry, not else if. This should be elif. I'm coding another language here. Sorry, not else if, elif, E-L-I-F. Apologize about that, but elif. Then you put the condition, and then whatever you put in the indented block below that will happen if this is not true, but this is true. So I hope that makes sense, but it goes like, check this. If it's true, do this and skip the rest of it. And then if this is not true, check this. If this is true, do this, skip the rest of it. If this is not true, go into the else and do this. That is kind of the way that this works. And you can actually put multiple elif statements underneath each other. So you can do if, elif, 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 else. And these again are all optional, but just remember that the else always comes at the end. The elifs go in between, and that you can have as many of them as you want, but you don't need to. So that's an important thing. But let's just have a look at what happens now. So let's say, what is your name? Tim. What is your age? Let's do 15. And now it says, hello, Tim, you're 15 years old. You can play with supervision. So that is the basics of the if, elif, else. Now let me scrap this. Actually, I won't scrap this, but I'll get rid of the else if. And let's leave it at this for now, because it's going to say, okay, actually, we'll add one more thing to finish it up. If age is greater than or equal to 18, print you are old enough to play. And now what I want to do to wrap this up is ask them a question. Do you want to play? So if they're old enough to play, let's ask them if they want to play, and let's do that inside of here. So only if they're older than 18 and they're old enough to play, then I will ask them if they want to play. Otherwise, I'm not going to. So inside this if statement, I'm actually going to say, wants underscore to underscore play. You can name this variable anything you want. I just like to make mine descriptive. And I'll say input, do you want to play? Now I'm doing a space here just so that when they start typing, and I forgot to mention this in the last video, when they start typing, it doesn't get squished right beside the text. So I just add a space afterwards, and it makes it a little bit nicer. But wants to play equals input, do you want to play? And now I'm going to check if they want to play. So I'm going to say if, and I will actually say wants to play equals yes. So if what they type in is equal to yes, then print let's play, exclamation point. So I know that was a lot. Let me zoom out a bit here just so we can read this a little bit easier. And now let's run this program for the last time before we wrap up this video. So what is your name? Tim. What is your age? 18. Hello, Tim. You're 18 years old. You're old enough to play. Do you want to play? Let's type yes. And it says let's play. Awesome. Let's run this one more time. What is your name? Tim. What is your age? Let's go younger than this time. So let's go 17. Hello, Tim, you're 17 years old. You're not old enough to play. So I hope this is starting to make sense, but I'll just give you a really quick summary. So we welcome the user. We ask them for their name and their age. We convert their age right away to a number so that we can actually compare it later on. We then say, hello, whatever their name is. You are, whatever their age is, years old. We then check how old they are. If they're older than 18, we tell them that they're old enough to play, and then we ask them if they want to play. If they say yes, so if they type in the string yes, we print let's play. Otherwise, we tell them they're not old enough to play. And that is the very beginning of our game. And I hope you can see what's kind of going to happen here in the future, right? So when they want to play, now what I'm going to do is inside of here, I'm going to ask them their first question. So I'm going to say, okay, your first decision is, do you want to go left or right? Or we'll make something up. And we're going to keep kind of chaining inwards and nesting if statements together just to make all these blocks with all these different decisions. And you're going to see it's going to get pretty intricate pretty quickly, but I think this is pretty cool. And right now you've learned almost everything you need to know to make this full game. So with that being said, that's going to be this video. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.